Okay, so we're now going to look at objects in JavaScript and exactly what objects are. We'll then take a little look at how we actually define an object. But the first thing to note is that in JavaScript most things are objects. Now we've already looked at variable types like strings and integers and things like that. But what happens if we create a string and we want to find out the length of that string, for example? We want to go ahead and search for a particular character within that string. Well, we have methods that are available on that actual string that we create. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create a variable within this app.js file. We'll head over to our browser and we'll start to have a look at this variable that we create. Now bear in mind this is a string, but we're actually looking at an introduction to objects. So we'll find now that this string actually is an object and has its own methods that we can use. Now when I talk about methods, I talk about functions, and when I talk about properties, I talk about variables. We'll go into that in a bit more detail later. So let's go ahead and create this name variable. That will just be a simple string. We could do all of this within the browser if we wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and open up my console. If I go ahead and type in name, you can see that we just get the result Alex back as a string. Now what happens if I want to go ahead and access, say, the length of this string? How would I do that? And in other programming languages, you might be used to doing things like strlen, so for example in PHP, and then entering the name or the value of the variable you want to, or the value that you want to find the string length of. Now in this case, this would be taking the sort of literal variable type of a string, passing it into this function and doing something with it. But in fact what we're actually doing here is we have in JavaScript a list of methods already attached to the object prototype, which inherit from the string inherits from the object prototype. So what we can now do is, rather than doing string length name, we can do name dot. Now you can already see in my browser we've got a list of methods and properties that have actually come up here. So we can have a play around with these, and this is the beauty of working within the console. We can have a look at what's available. And remember, we're still working with a string, which is really strange that we have all of these methods available. But remember that all or most variable types or most things in JavaScript are objects. So if in doubt, come over to your console and just start type a dot and see what kind of properties you can access here. And there are so many here that we can sort of examine. We'll have a look at them, a few of them in a minute, and then we'll go on to looking at actually creating an object itself, an object literal. But let's go ahead and type in length. Now you can already see that sort of auto-completing for us. This is a property that holds the amount of characters in this string. That will return us the value 4. So we now know that we can use this. Now as well as that, that's a property. So remember, that's a property, i.e. a variable, if you like, that's been stored within this object. I'm going to refer to them as properties and methods from now on, but just remember that properties are variables and methods are functions. They're only methods and properties when they become part of an object. So if they were standalone, there would be variables and functions, so don't get the two confused. So when we scroll down, we can see things like chart at, which is pretty useful. This is a method, and it allows you to pick a character from your string based on its position. Now remember, this is 0 index we're looking at, so if I was to type 0, you'll probably guess we'll get the letter A back, and if we were to do chart at, say, 5, you can see that this is nothing because that doesn't actually exist. That would be the 6th sort of positioned element. 3 would be X because it's 0 index, so it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3. That would be the X in that string. We can also do cooler things like search. Let's just have a look at here, so that you can see that search there. That's a method as well. And if I was to go ahead and search for A, that returns us 0, and that returns us the position that we are the A character is found at. The same with X as well. If we provide something that isn't available, that will return us with a -1. That's quite a common concept in programming languages. If something can't be found, it will return a -1, just so you can easily put that within an if statement. So you can see here that even though we're working with a string, we're actually working with an object. Now let's go ahead and just clear the console, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, but this time I'm going to literally define a string, and you'll see that this still works. We can still just define a string like this, and then afterwards use dot, and then we can use a property, or we can even go ahead and search it, and it still works. So regardless of whether we've stored a variable or not, we can actually use this literally to pull values out. And we've got things as well like not working with integers or numbers in this way, but when you look at arrays as well, arrays are objects as well. So if we were to do something like Alex, Dale, and Billy, as we've seen before, we can still access things like .length in here, so that gives us 3 back. We can do exactly the same thing here. So just remember that in JavaScript, almost everything is an object, and you can always play around with the console if you're not sure. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to take a slight sort of diversion and actually look at object literals, which is creating your own object rather than using objects that have already been created for you. So when we created the string name, it was an object that was already created for us, and we had all the properties associated with it and the methods available to it as well. But when we create our own object, so let's go ahead and say var let's say app equals object. Now this is an object literal, so it's literally just defining brackets, empty brackets, and then a semicolon at the end here. Now when we go ahead and type in app here, you'll see that we just get this back saying, oh, it's an object. Now what we can do with app is we can say things like app dot name equals JavaScript, for example. Now what that's done is when we go ahead and we type in app now, you'll see that we've got an object with a property here, which is a variable, and it's stored a string here. And we can even then go as far as doing things like app.name.length. So we're sort of putting objects within objects. So it's a very object-oriented programming language, JavaScript, even though at first glance it appears it isn't, because you're doing things often in a very procedural way. So this is how we create objects very, very basically. We won't go into it too much, but with an object we can store whatever we want in there, and we can do this much like the string that we've seen by storing values and creating methods which are functions, and we can do things with certain values within our object. So in the next video what we'll do is we'll have a look at creating an object, and we'll create something useful that actually does something useful. And then we'll practice sort of creating the object, creating the properties that we need, and then actually using methods on that.